Welcome, listeners, to Time for an Awakening on Black Talk Radio Network, new media for the new millennia. This is a history and current events program from a cultural perspective. We find this program necessary because Hosea 4:6 states, "My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge." But we as a people can turn this around. Proverbs 4:7 states, "Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom. And with all thy getting, get an understanding." Again, welcome to the program this evening with your host, Brother Elliot and Brother Richard. The number to reach us to join the conversation this evening is 215-490-9832. That's 215-490-9832. We're streaming live at several locations. You can go to timeforanawakening.com. That's timeforanawakening.com and listen to the broadcast live from the website. You can go to www.blacktalkradionetwork.com/timeforanawakening. Again, that's www.blacktalkradionetwork.com/time-for-an-awakening and listen to the program streaming live there. You can download the TuneIn app. TuneIn is a free app, and you can download it to any of your devices, your laptop, your desktop, your iPad, your iPhone, your tablet. And download the TuneIn app, and in that search engine, just type in Time for an Awakening radio program. There you'll see the icon, and you can listen to the live stream even into your car. That's Time for an Awakening with the live stream on the TuneIn app. Drop us an email at timeforanawakening@gmail.com. That's timeforanawakening@gmail.com. Time for Awakening also has a fan page on Facebook. In that Facebook search engine, just type in Time for an Awakening radio program. There you always see interesting content being posted daily. And before you leave that page, just hit that like button. That's Time for an Awakening radio program with the fan page on Facebook. And Time for Awakening Media has been launched. Just put that in your address bar. Make that one of your favorites. Just go to timeforanawakening.com. That's timeforanawakening.com. Will take you straight to Time for an Awakening Media. There you'll see more interesting blogs, articles, podcasts of the programs that you can download, listen at later times, or even share with your friends. So again, make that one of your favorites and put that in your address bar. Timeforanawakening.com. That's timeforanawakening.com. Will take you straight to Time for an Awakening Media. Tonight, an interesting program with a very interesting guest joining us, author, historian, and John J. and Rebecca Moore Chair of History at the John J. and Rebecca Moore's Chair of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston, Professor Gerald Horne, will be joining us in discussion. The book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, Slave Resistance and the Origin of the United States of America. This will be a very interesting discussion with Professor Horne, and we'll be right back to get things started after a brief word from our sponsors.
Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies. Everybody is here.
You are tuned in to the Black Talk Radio Network. For podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com.
All Insurance Incorporated, an African-American owned and operated insurance agency in business for over 20 years, located at 231 Southeastern Road in Glenside, PA, with other offices in Germantown and West Philadelphia. Call now for commercial insurance quotes, homeowners insurance quotes, automobile insurance quotes, notary and tax services, representing over 15 major A-rated insurance companies, offering a discount on all notary services when you call in for a free quote. Call this number, 215 215-885-2444. That number is 215-885-2444. 215-885-2444. All Insurance Incorporated.
Before your roof becomes unruly, call Dooley. Dooley Brothers, specializing in shingle, rubber roofs, gutters, downspouts, and vinyl sidings. Call for your free estimate today. 215-224-3882. That's 215-224-3882. Dooley Brothers Roofing, the roofing experts you can trust. That number again, 215-224-3882. 215-224-3882. Before your roof becomes unruly, call Dooley.
History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. History tells of people where they have been and what they have been, where they are and what they are. Most important, history tells a people where they still must go, what they still must be. The relationship of history to the people is the same as the relationship of a mother to her child.
From antiquity to the present, our people need to develop a new paradigm. It's time for an awakening with your host, Brother Elliot. Sundays, 7 p.m., Fridays at 8 p.m. for podcasting or live program scheduling. Hit us up at timeforanawakening@gmail.com. Welcome back to Time for an Awakening. And again, I want to welcome my co-host, Philadelphia activist and tour guide at the African American Museum here at Philadelphia at 7th and Arch. Brother Richard is joining us on the line. Brother Richard.
Yes, sir. I'm glad once again that you were able to reach out and get someone that we really could develop ourselves from. And hopefully the listener has recognized that Professor Horne, in my opinion, has really done an excellent, superb job in chronicling our history in different perspectives. So I'm glad to learn and engage with him.
You know, that clip that we played just before we start the program with John Henry Clark talking about history is a clock to tell people their cultural time of day. That's something that our people really have to start taking to heart and re-educate ourselves, our men and women, our children, to understand the role that we play in this world and the role that we'll have to play in the future. You know, leading up to this conversation that we're about to momentarily have, we just left the month of February, which is President's Day, where the founding fathers are honored. Leading up to the Declaration of Independence, 4th of July coming up in when everybody is in celebration mode of the founding of this country. But our guest tonight talks about the myth of the founding of this country needs to be corrected. His book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, Slave Resistance and the Origins of the United States of America, should be on everybody's shelf. If you don't have it, make sure you get it after this program is over. Go out and order it. Tonight, it's a pleasure to have author, historian, Professor Gerald Horne with us this evening. Professor Horne, how are you, sir?
Finding yourself.
I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you on Time for Awakening with myself and Brother Richard.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Professor Horne, you know, let's get right into it. It was interesting. Brother Richard pulled my coat to your work. I went on and did some research because, I call myself up on a lot of things, especially historians, because this program is based on having historians come on. But I wasn't familiar with the book that he kind of pulled my coat to. Professor Horne, in your opinion, or in my opinion, and I want to get your opinion, I don't think there's been a real critique of the founding of this country. It's a lot of ballyhoo and pomp and circumstance surrounding 1776. and it has spilled over into the mindset and psyche of black folks. It's understandable why it's in the mindset of most white folks. But in your opinion, is there a myth surrounding 1776 that we as black people really need to understand? And how does that impact our history? And what was our participation or non-participation or resistance to the founding of this country?
Yes, there was and is a myth surrounding the founding of the United States of America. Although I'm happy to say, since my book was published a few years ago, a couple of other books have emerged that, not going as far as my book, begin to unmask the founding of the United States of America. And that's a very positive sign. And you are correct in your presumption, sadly and tragically, that until the publication of my book, there really hadn't been the kind of searching critical examination of the founding. Now, of course, many historians had sort of gone up to the precipice and gone up to the verge of unmasking, but then they sort of looked down into the precipice and then walked back. I won't mention their names because it may not reflect well upon them. But in a nutshell, the United States was founded not least because the European settlers in this settler colony revolted because they thought Britain was moving towards the abolition of slavery per Somerset's case in June 1772 in London, a case that abolished enslavement of Africans in England. They had good reason to believe that that case would cross the Atlantic, thereby jeopardizing fortunes, not to mention jeopardizing the ongoing project of seizing the land of the Native American population. And rather than undergo that prospect, they revolted and kicked out the British. They went on to, of course, oust the British from the leadership of the African slave trade. That had taken place, I would say, by the late 18th century, that is to say, a mere few decades after 1776. And as I've said in subsequent books, for example, my book on Cuba, I pointed out that as early as the 1790s, the United States was in charge of bringing Africans to Cuba. As I said in my book on Brazil, as early as the late 1830s, the United States was involved in the leadership of bringing Africans to Brazil, which now has the largest black population outside of Nigeria. And correspondingly, as Britain was ousted from this lucrative market, it, of course, turned on both slavery and the slave trade, abolishing the slave trade by 1807, well before the United States, and then, of course, abolishing slavery in Barbados, Jamaica, etc., 1833, 1834. And it's very difficult to imagine how a state like the United States, which was in the leadership of foisting manacles and chains upon Africans, not only in North America, but in Cuba and Brazil, somehow has been Christian as embodying a great leap forward for humanity. I mean, this is mind-boggling that this myth has persisted for so long. And certainly, I think the myth has been very corrosive on the politics and consciousness of the African population in North America, because when they have been rebelling since 1776, in many ways they were told that they were rebelling against this great leap forward for humanity. It's almost like they were reactionary by seeking to break the chains of slavery. And it becomes very difficult to even understand what's happening today with the election of Donald J. Trump, unless one understands this history, unless one understands the fact that the United States was a settler colony. Interestingly enough, settler colony is a term that's generally absent from the political vocabularies, even of people who consider themselves to be radical, which also helps to explain why the United States had difficulty in confronting other settler colonies, such as apartheid South Africa, for example, such as Rhodesia, the predecessor outlaw state to Zimbabwe. And it also helps to shed light on other settler revolts, not unlike the settler revolt in 1776. For example, the settler revolt in Rhodesia, 1965, where the Europeans were seeking to forestall the onset of decolonization of that nation that is to say one person, one vote, which would have meant African majority rule, or the settler revolt in Algeria in the 1950s, where the settlers were seeking to forestall the arrival of decolonization and one person, one vote. And even if one looks at states that did not have a revolt but were under British rule, I mean, for example, Canada. We all know about following the North Star to Canada. That's what the Africans did in trying to escape the oppression and persecution in North America. Now, it's rather strange indeed that the so-called revolutionary republic, the United States of America, people were trying to escape it and go to this British colony that was Canada that did not revolt against British rule. I mean, this kind of mental acrobatics, that the failure to honestly confront the history of this country has been very corrosive, not only, I would say, to the black population, but also to the so-called white population as well, which has not been forced to confront its history. And in fact, it helps to shed light on this distinction between the liberals and conservatives, which is the dominant paradigm in the United States of America. I don't know if you've seen the new film Get Out.
No, I haven't seen it as of yet.
Well, it's very interesting. You know, it's a science fiction film in a sense, a social thriller is what the filmmaker calls it. And it basically is an attack on liberal mythology. And through the lens of showing racism. And I think, just to step back for a second and connect this to our discussion this evening, I think that increasingly, particularly with the election of Donald J. Trump, many in our community are beginning to question not only conservative mythology, which of course we have little trouble unmasking, but also we're beginning to confront liberal mythology, which has gone along with the myth of 1776 to our detriment. The only question is, where do we go from here?
Professor Horne, you and I'm going to pass the mic to Brother Richard. You talked, I saw a Democracy Now! Interview that you did, and I want you to expound on this for our listening audience. You mentioned to the host, to understand the events of 1776, you must understand what took place in 1688. Mm-hmm. Talk about those events leading up to 1776 for our listening audience.
Well, fortunately, by the end of the year, I'll have a new book out called The Apocalypse of Settler Colonialism, The Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, and Capitalism in North America and the Caribbean, which sheds further light on 1688. But in the book we're discussing this evening, what I basically say is that there was a so-called Glorious Revolution in England in 1688, where the monarchy took a step back and the rising merchant class took a step forward. This was particularly true for the African slave trade, which theretofore had been under the thumb of the king through the organizing of the Royal African Company in 1672. Now, the organizing of the Royal African Company in 1672 represented a giant leap backwards for African people in particular, but 1688 in many ways dwarfs 1672 because you had a deregulation of the African slave trade. In other words, not only was the monarch involved in enslaving Africans, but scores of merchants, as the project of free trade in Africans was unleashed. And these merchants descended upon the African continent with the maniacal and crazed energy of diabolical bees, manacling and handcuffing every African in sight, dragging them across the Atlantic, particularly, I would say, to Jamaica and Barbados in the first instance. But what happened, as so often happens, is that these merchants overreached. They had dragged so many Africans across the Atlantic to these sugar islands because they were producing sugar, which was not only used to sweeten tea, but was also seen as a kind of miracle drug and also as a sign of status to use sugar, believe it or not, even though today it's seen in the opposite manner. But by dragging so many Africans across the Atlantic, they created favorable conditions for slave revolts, which proceeded. which then led to a great trek of European settlers from the Caribbean to North America, where the European settlers thought they could escape slave revolts. But, of course, they could not and did not, because, of course, there was a major slave revolt in New York City in 1712 and South Carolina, and perhaps the bloodiest of them all, in 1739, and New York City again in 1741. And what happened to characterize what characterizes these slave revolts is the fact that the Africans oftentimes were collaborating with the enemies of the settlers. That's been one of the hallmarks of our existence in North America. That is to say, we find out who the chief enemy of the settler class is, and then we work with them to undermine the settlers. Interestingly enough, I should say parenthetically, since in the last 60 years with the agonized retreat of so-called legalized Jim Crow or U.S. apartheid and a kind of citizenship, that particular strategy has gathered dust, although with the election of Donald J. Trump, which might represent a new moment, you may see a resuscitation and revival of that strategy. But in any case, you saw that the Africans in South Carolina in 1739 were collaborating with the Spanish in Florida. Many of these Africans in South Carolina were Angolans. Angola, as you know, had been confronted, if not colonized, by the Portuguese since the late 15th century, the 1490s. Many of these Africans spoke Portuguese, which is quite similar to Spanish. Many of them had been converted, oftentimes forcibly, to the Roman Catholic faith, which was also the faith of the Spanish in Florida. And so they both joined together and tried to overthrow the English and other British settlers in South Carolina. And likewise, yes?
Dr. Horne, question. And then, because I'm going to ask this one more thing, I'm going to pass it to Brother Richard. You talked about the deregulation that happened in 1688. And it sounds like you're describing the origin of infightings between European nations over our ancestors. So before the deregulation, how was this crime against humanity, this slave trade, conducted? Was it one person in charge and they allocated different European nations to deal with different areas of the mother continent before the deregulation, when you stated that just willy-nilly Europeans just ran over there just maniacally handcuffing and taking our ancestors off the shore? How was it handled before the deregulation?
Well, you need to understand that the Spanish had a first mover's advantage with regard to the slave trade.
Okay.
Of course, going back to 1492 and the journey of Christopher Columbus, which we all know about. But, of course, the Spanish were also heavily involved in enslaving indigenous populations. You'll find the indigenous population of the Americas, you'll find their DNA all over the world because they were enslaving and depopulating the Americas by enslaving the indigenous population, then shipping them out to the four corners of the world, and then bringing Africans into, say, Jamaica, for example. But it wasn't just the Spanish. The French were involved. The Dutch were huge players before the end of the 1600s. The Danish were involved. Swedes were involved. It was really a festival and a carnival for Europeans generally. But with the formation of the Royal African Company in 1672, you saw that England, which was something of a non-entity as late as the late 1500s, then began to surge to the forefront. Now, England surged to the forefront. A number of deliberate steps take place. One, the taking of Jamaica from the Spanish in 1655. Then the taking of what are now the Middle Atlantic states of the United States, including Pennsylvania, by the way, in 1662, 1663, 1664. And then that opens up more territory to oust the indigenous and bring in more Africans, which leads to the formation of the Royal African Company in 1672. But what's happening, as you can readily envision, is that the monarchy is creating conditions for its own retreat, because by opening up land and bringing in more Africans, you're bringing in more settlers who are getting enriched, and they begin to oppose this idea of the monarchy monopolizing this lucrative fortune in enslaved Africans and stolen land. And that leads to the push in 1688, which, by the way, there's a new book called Freedom's Debt from University of North Carolina Press, which makes the point that the empowering of Parliament, which is oftentimes seen as this great leap forward for democracy, that the empowerment of Parliament in England has a lot to do with trying to strip the powers of the king to monopolize the African slave trade. Therefore, freedom's debt, freedom being this so-called democracy, owes a debt to Africa and Africans. And then, as noted, with 1688, you see this expansion, this explosion in terms of the manacling and handcuffing of Africans, which provides wealth that leads to the rise of capitalism because, of course, the African slave trade involves building ships. It involves insurance policies because the Africans had this tendency to revolt, and you had to insure against that prospect. It involved the rise of banking because these voyages had to be financed. And therein, you begin to see the rise of the system called capitalism, in which we are still enmeshed. But what's interesting about that is that even though our ancestors basically provided the fuel for the rise of this system called capitalism, there are not that many in our community who connect those dots and go in and make a critique of capitalism. I mean, that's ironic indeed, shall we say.
Brother Richard.
Well, oh man, Dr. Horne, I really appreciate your work, and I'm glad that you opened that up because that was one of my things I was fascinated. I am fascinated about your work because you make the origin of the European economic system, what they call now the global system. And I think it was I heard Martin, financial commentator for the Financial Times, called when they had the crisis in 2008. He said the Anglo-Saxon system was in crisis, which it's the first for me. It was the first time hearing them codify in recent history in a commercial press that this is an Anglo-Saxon system that has global connection, and it seems that your work kind of focuses on developing that premise, that it is them, France, Germany, Spain, Britain, and then the colonial American, or as you say, colonial settlers, those merchants, freeing themselves up to be in this trade, which is like really powerful. And one thing trying to stay in what you were raising, I was looking at that petition that was in 1696, which gave them making the argument of the traders to be able to engage more in the trade, which opened, as you said, that floodgate of these individual individual traders, merchants, actually making more money by transporting Africans. You've developed it, but can you take us through that period of them traders? Because I did also read Freedom's Debt, and they kind of, with the point that you made, it was really important as far as what we even talk about now when they talk about free trade, because it seems that's a continuation of them.
Well, first of all, with regard to your prior point, I think you were referring to Martin Wolf of the Financial Times of London. And by the way, in terms of these leading bourgeois newspapers, the capitalist newspapers, I would put the Financial Times above the New York Times, certainly above the Wall Street Journal, which is almost a parody of a bourgeois newspaper nowadays. Because, number one, the Financial Times is written explicitly for the investor class in the North Atlantic community, whereas the New York Times, of course, is written for a broader audience. And as a result, if you're going to make investments, you really have to have an idea of what's going on. You can't afford to believe in the alternative facts, as Kellyanne Conway, the Bush advisor, might put it. And so I think you'll find a much more comprehensive view of the capitalist economy in the Financial Times. Likewise, I think with regard to this so-called Anglo-American system, which is the rightward edge of capitalism, we're going to have to pay very close attention to what's happening this year, because June 2016, we had Brexit, the British exit from the European Union, which has really, of course, fueled Donald J. Trump, but has upset a goodly number of the capitalist class on both sides of the Atlantic. Although we have to pay careful and close attention to how Trump might try to capitalize on this by seeking to forge a so-called Anglo-American alliance, not only against the usual suspects, the Africans, the people in Latin America, the Asians, et cetera, but also against the European Union, against Germany and France. I mean, I hope you paid attention to the rather frosty, chilling meeting between Chancellor Merkel this past 24 to 48 hours and Donald J. Trump, because that's what the Germans are expecting. And then, of course, you had the election of Donald J. Trump in November 2016. And then just a few days ago, you had the election of the Netherlands, which, as I said, was an early leader in the African slave trade. As a matter of fact, if you had talked to people in 1620 as to who might be the global superpower in 2017, they might have said Holland, certainly not England. But, of course, Holland has been in decline for 300 years, which it might be comforting for people in the United States who are worried about U.S. decline, because Holland's been in decline for 300 years, but in some places it's still a rather pleasant place to live. That's comforting, I'm sure, to those who have all their money invested in this country. But in any case, you notice that in Holland, the right-wing populist, Geert Wilders, the Donald J. Trump of the Netherlands, they did not prevail. Now we're going to have to watch the French elections in a few weeks, April 23rd, and see if Marine Le Pen, the leader of the neo-fascists, whether or not she prevails. And then we have to watch the German elections a few months after that to see if the neo-fascists prevail there, which I doubt. Then if that plans out, what that'll tell us is that the right-wing populist surge is basically an Anglo-American right-wing populist surge, which then raises the possibility of a global front against the Anglo-American alliance. Now, there's some other, excuse me for going on about what's happening today, but
oh, that's good.
I've been looking for somebody to tell this to.
And we've been waiting for someone to tell us, too.
Okay. Then, of course, with the election of Donald J. Trump and all this blather about Russia, and then we could go into that in more detail, but it seemed as if Donald J. Trump wanted to flip the script, and just like Nixon had gone to China in the early 1970s and was able to woo China into an anti-Moscow alliance that led directly to the collapse of the Soviet Union by 1991, now it seemed, per Trump, that the Yankees were going to try to woo Moscow and then enlist them against China. Now, that's what I was thinking in November 2016. And by the way, even though I think the liberals have gone overboard in trying to act as if Putin won the election for Trump, I do think there needs to be an investigation of the relationship nonetheless, although we're going to have to walk a tightrope, because the investigation of the relationship should not lead to a new Cold War, which would not be in our interest. But in any case, you might recall that just after his election, Trump reached out to the leader of Taiwan, which China sees as a rebel province, and he said that this was negotiable, this whole idea of Taiwan. President Xi Jinping refused to talk to Trump, and then in mid-February 2017, Trump backed down. Perhaps somebody told him that the United States government stays afloat by borrowing money from China. And now you see Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State in China, just today, shaking hands in a grip and grin with President Xi, actually quoting language about win-win that's from the Chinese playbook. President Xi invited to Mar-a-Lago in Florida to be wooed by China, to try to woo China. And so now I'm trying to puzzle this out. Okay, so I thought he was going to try to – so I can't decide if Trump is simply incoherent, or is there some sort of method in this madness, or is it that he's going to try to neutralize both Russia and China so he can go after the rest of the world? Because usually when U.S. imperialism goes after countries, Russia or China try to check them. But if he neutralizes them both, then perhaps he can go after the rest of the world and then get momentum to the point where he can then go after Russia and China. At least that's what I was thinking. Everything's in a state of flux right now, so I
was thinking that the connection between Trump and Russia was because of the oil pipeline that Russia has that goes through the western part of Europe, and the tie that Europe or even the European Union is dealing with, that they don't want to disrupt Russia because they do want that oil to come through as a byproduct, and the relationship between Russia and China. But it would also move everyone out of the Middle East because of the tension that I think that has escalated to the point at this point, especially when they're saying these are non-state actors. But the other side with North America was with this fracking and the whole idea that these Exxon and them can be able to put a cheaper oil on the market and sell to Europe. It might balance out if a Trump and Russia would be able to make some kind of deal so that to put in check these because of the tension, the environmentalist tension, and maybe the populist tension about really going whole hog, if that's a phrase, to pull this oil out, this fracking this oil, because people are do have some resistance, and the more they do, the more water they'll see that is getting polluted by this fracking. But with Russia, it's already a given that they can be able to move that oil through. Is that the Baltic area, I believe, that had been talked about, even along with, I remember Brzezinski raising this point when he did the grand chessboard, that area was an area of concern in relationship to either NATO getting control or the fear, and how Russia could be able to move and create connections. And Europe has already, England, France, they have already said they don't want any destabilization on that side because they could use that oil instead of shipping back and forth with Saudi Arabia. So my thinking was, and it's not developed, but just that Trump seems to be the best guy to put forward to raise his hand to change the Cold War kind of paradigm that has been going on around Russia, to say, well, we can do business, and that will fall right within his framework. That was undeveloped. That's my thinking.
Yeah, I understand, and certainly the energy market is in a state of flux too. I'm speaking to you from the place that calls itself the Petro Metro, that is to say Houston, where the economy is heavily dependent upon keeping close tabs on petroleum. And, of course, there are meetings here all the time, international meetings, just one a week or so ago, involving oil lords and captains from all over the world. And certainly there's a real concern right now about the continuing fall in the price of a barrel of oil, which is jeopardizing budgets, not only in Russia, not only in Texas, but also in Nigeria and Angola as well. Keep in mind that ExxonMobil has a stranglehold over the oil of Equatorial Guinea, by the way, which is a major producer. And, of course, that relationship has helped to keep in power the Obiang family since 1979, by the way. And, of course, the sons of Teodoro Obiang, of course, are living large all over the world, including having property, at least recently, in Malibu, just outside of the city of Los Angeles. Also, ExxonMobil has invested heavily in natural gas, particularly in Mozambique. As you know, the Mozambicans have been softened up over the years after fighting a heroic liberation struggle and insurgent independence in 1975 over Portuguese colonialism backed by the United States and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But then about 10 years later, the founding father, Samora Machel, was assassinated by the apartheid authorities. His plane was driven into a mountain intentionally. You may recall that his widow wound up marrying Nelson Mandela some years after that. And now, of course, major natural gas discoveries have been made off the coast of Mozambique. Exxon has invested heavily. So, and Rex Tillerson, former ExxonMobil CEO, is now Secretary of State. So obviously we're going to have to watch Africa policy like a hawk under this new Trump team. But certainly I think we need a closer and more careful scrutiny of oil politics when it comes to trying to figure out what this Trump team is up to, not only because of what you said, the relationship with Russia, but also, of course, because of his selection of Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State. And also, you know, I mean, as I said, I think the liberals have gone overboard in terms of trying to blame the election of Trump on Putin. I mean, look, the black community was subjected to fake news from Eastern Europe. Not all of that fake news was coming from Moscow. Some of it was coming from Macedonia, by the way. But, you know, the liberals tend to ignore that because that doesn't fit into their larger narrative. But, you know, the black community was subjected to fake news, and we voted against Trump 9-1. So just to say that, you know, hacking from Russia and all that led to Trump, I think is a bridge too far. And it evades the responsibility of doing an analysis of voter suppression of the black community in Milwaukee, for example. It's really stunning, the kind of nonfeasance and malfeasance that these liberals have gone through, which once again aligns the importance of the film Get Out. But I guess you want me to get back to the African slave trade.
But let me say something in reference to that, Dr. Horne, because you did draw a parallel to show us that the mindset basically of Europeans to crave more riches and to continuously develop capitalism haven't really changed. And it also tells us that we as a people need to do better as far as knowing our history and knowing what we need to do. The reason I'm saying is because what I want you to talk about is the role of black resistance to 1776. You know, you touched on the 1712 Manhattan Revolt, which happened in the North up here in New York, and the Stoner Rebellion, which happened in South Carolina. But you mentioned in a Democracy Now!, I think, piece, or the C-SPAN piece, that the settlers believed that the French were supplying our ancestors with weapons in the northern revolts, and that the Spanish were supplying our ancestors with weapons in the southern revolts. And I just want you to go into some of those revolts, because some of our people, they don't realize the level of revolts here in this country and outside of the country, because it's not really talked about. You know, the ones that Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, and Denmark Vesey, but others our people don't really know about because that information is suppressed all the time. Our people weren't watching a tennis match, watching this country develop and just sitting on their hands. Our people were trying to free themselves. So talk about our role of resistance leading up to 1776.
Well, I would not only say resistance was a major force pre-1776 and following 1776. I would also go, I can't remember if I said this explicitly in that book in 1776, but this is, if I were to writing it today, this is what I would write. And I may have written it then, too. But basically, there was a struggle for the control of North America amongst various forces. These forces included European powers, such as London, Madrid, and Paris. These forces included the settlers, mostly British settlers, who wound up triumphant. And these forces included Native Americans and Africans. Now, the Native Americans and Africans were oftentimes allied, and they would oftentimes ally with these European powers at various stages to try to advance their agenda. And that is why I have in a complete chapter in the 1776 book talking about resistance, including arson, poisoning, slave revolts, murders. Matter of fact, the arson was so significant that ultimately I would say that if someone were to do a history of fire departments, just like if you were to do a history of urban police departments, you have to connect it in North America to the slave factor. With regard to poisonings, I recall in that 1776 book having a paragraph about Georgia in particular, where the poisoning was so systematic that it's easy to infer that there was this phenomenon which we might call ethnobotanists amongst the Africans who had uncovered secrets of poisonous plants and were promiscuously using them against the settlers. Now, this was, of course, not unique to North America, as in fact, the Americas generally were inflamed, and there was a struggle, not unlike the struggle in North America, as to who would prevail. Now, we know, for example, in the 1750s, that in what is now Haiti, there was a mass plot of the Africans to poison the settlers that was barely defeated. We also know that by 1791, with the onset of the Haitian Revolution, you saw a breach in the wall of slavery, particularly the triumph of the Haitian Revolution in 1804. And you know I have this book on the Haitian Revolution, Confronting Black Jacobins, where I put forward the argument that the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804, represented a general crisis of the entire slave system that could only be resolved with that slave system's collapse. More specifically, with the triumph of the Haitian Revolution, we were able to flip Britain and get Britain a few years later to abolish the slave trade, and then it was worried about its investments in Jamaica and Barbados to move to abolish slavery to get out while the getting was good, whereas the Yankees, of course, dug in their heels and therefore had to be forced into a bloody civil war, 1861 to 1865. But in other words, the Haitian Revolution, I would say, was the key factor in helping to explain why and where we are today and where we were able to escape enslavement, which is why we all owe an enormous debt of gratitude to our brothers and sisters in Haiti that can never and will never be repaid. And that's a kind of interpretation that I think we need to focus on as this 21st century unfolds.
You talked about the Manhattan Slave Revolt and also Stono, but talk about Lord Dunmore. I think he was a governor in Virginia at the time, and his relationship with some of our enslaved ancestors. It was a strange relationship. Talk about that.
Well, Lord Dunmore, briefly, in 1775, when the settlers were brewing their revolt, he offered to free Africans.
Now, wait a minute. Before you talk about that, was Lord Dunmore one of the settlers, or he was a...
He was the colonial governor of Virginia.
Okay.
The last colonial governor of Virginia, by the way. And as the Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and George Washington and all these slave owners were cooking up their revolt, he was trying to outfox them by offering to free their most valued property to repel against them. So, of course, he's considered a bad guy with regard to the settlers. But what's interesting, in writing this book that'll be out later this year that I've already mentioned, that tactic of the Europeans seeking to ally with the Africans in order, and both of course, the Africans have their agendas, the Europeans have their agenda. Oftentimes the agendas dovetail. So in 1655, when the English were trying to overthrow the Spanish in Jamaica, and of course they did successfully, the Spanish freed Africans, anticipating Lord Dunmore, in the hopes that the Africans would help the Spanish repel the English. And of course, what happened is that from that point forward, the Africans in Jamaica were sort of an independent third force, if you like, not allied with the victorious Londoners, not allied with the settlers. But of course, as Maroons, they were battering the settlers from time to time, et cetera. And then that, even if you go back to the late 1500s, when the Queen's pirate, Sir Francis Drake, sailed into what is now Panama and was seeking to loot and plunder the Spanish there, he was trying to entice the Seminoles, or the Maroons, the Africans there, to ally with London. And of course, the Seminoles had a bone to pick with Spain, who they were familiar with, and so they were not necessarily hostile to what Sir Francis Drake was putting down. And then skip ahead a few centuries to 1863, Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. I mean, that was basically, I'm giving a test to my introduction to African American Studies. I hope none of them are listening, because I'm about to tell one of the questions. One of the questions I'm going to ask is, why was the Emancipation Proclamation seen as a militarily expedient maneuver, more so than a humanitarian gesture? Because to that point, Lincoln's government was getting battered from pillar to post by the Confederates, who thought, not incorrectly, that they were more in tune with the founding and George Washington and the slaveholders than these whippersnappers like Abraham Lincoln. And so, particularly after Antietam in the fall of 1862, Lincoln needed more troops. And so he freed the Africans under the jurisdiction of the so-called Confederate States of America, and of course, sort of overlooked the Africans who were enslaved under his jurisdiction. And that proved to be the turning point in the war. And so the point that you should glean from this little journey through history is how the Africans, of course, oftentimes were trying to exercise self-determination, that the Africans which oftentimes had their own agenda, and oftentimes this agenda did not coincide with the agenda of the settlers, and that the Africans were not adverse to allying with foreign powers from time to time to try to crush the settlers. And this particular tendency continued on to the 20th century until finally the United States government decided to engage in this agonized retreat from legalized apartheid. But therein you begin to see the seeds of the Trump victory, because at the same time they were engaged in this agonized retreat from legalized apartheid, they were repressing working class organizations like unions, leading to this canard that the reactionary forces could put forward in 2016, that in the United States, they only care about black people, believe it or not. And the working class, which of course is constructed as white, the fact that we're working class somehow gets lost in the mix, that they're not concerned about the white working class. And that, of course, helped to bring Trump to power, and is one of the most potent propaganda maneuvers we'll have to fight in 2017.
Go ahead, Richard, because I'm going to take a break in about 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. Doesn't that fit in when you raise the point in your book about the Scott-Irish being brought in at different times because of labor and the discussion around that, but their allegiance, even in spite of the finance and merchant class, regardless of it being even, what was the term used today, at their own detriment. It seems that it's still a historical continuity when you look at the working class working against their own self-interest, and then even at that time, those ethnic Europeans who were brought in as laborers, but then thought that they were too expensive, or at times because of war in Europe, they wasn't as plentiful or readily, and Africans were brought in, that they still were working against their own self-interest.
Well, the working class, defined as white, oftentimes has felt that it has more to gain from a race alliance with the ruling elite than from a class alliance with working class people of color. And actually, if you look at the expropriation of the Native Americans, particularly in Georgia under Andrew Jackson, who, of course, is Trump's hero. He has his portrait in the Oval Office. He visited, I think he visited Andrew Jackson's grave in Tennessee when he was in Nashville the other day, or he'll be visiting it soon. And so they expropriate the Cherokees, even though many of the Cherokees were willing to go along with the program. They were willing to enslave Africans. They were willing to don so-called European dress and finery, but that didn't save them. They were still expelled, and their land was given out to many poor, white, so-called white working class people. And then the Homestead Act in the 1860s, as the Civil War is unfolding. The U.S. government is expropriating Native Americans, handing the land out to poor Europeans, because whiteness and white supremacy was an organizing principle. And so the so-called white working class had reason to believe that they had more to gain from an alliance with the ruling elite than with people in their own class. However, unfortunately, I don't think they paid attention to events over the last 60 to 70 years. That is to say, with the changing correlation of forces globally, it's become very difficult for U.S. imperialism to move forward the way it did, say, up to 1945, for example, or even up to 1955, for example. And it's unclear to me if this white working class is going to be able to benefit the way they benefited in the 19th century, but we'll see. I mean, I don't think that's going to work out, but, I've been wrong before. We'll see. And in any case, I know you have to take a break, and also I have to get along pretty soon.
Yeah. Now I know that we engaged you for an hour. Do you have maybe 10 more minutes, Professor Horne?
10 more minutes is fine.
Great. Well, in fact, maybe we'll hold a break, and we'll take it after you have to leave us. Professor Horne, you talked about Richard raised the question about poor Europeans coming over here, which basically the settlers were. You had Europeans here, the settlers. You had other European forces that were involved in other countries or lands of our diaspora. But it seems to me that the Europeans, because on Europe's home continent, there was always fighting going on, some of it behind religion. But it seems to me, now you correct me if I'm wrong, that they tabled a lot of these factions and fightings to kind of focus their attention on our ancestors, where they would have a unified front in dealing with our ancestors. Am I wrong, or did they talk about that?
Well, there's something to what you say. In the book, The Apocalypse of Settler Colonialism, which will be out later this year, that's one of the points that I make, that you have the 30 Years' War in Europe, which is gripping the continent, leading to massive depopulation of the European continent, basically coming to a close circa 1648. And coincidentally enough, by 1648, you see settler colonialism well underway, particularly in Virginia and Massachusetts. And with the depopulation of Europe, there becomes this felt need to repopulate or to populate the Americas, particularly if they're shipping out all the Native Americans, with Africans. And then that leads to the so-called Treaty of Westphalia, 1648, which, as you know, is still sort of a charter, if you like, for state sovereignty, where the Europeans basically decide to bury the hatchet, if I can use the North American phrase, although, of course, it doesn't work out very well because there's continuing wars in the 17th century, not least between London and the Dutch, the English and the Dutch. But in any case, there leads to a formal settlement that's oftentimes ignored. But I think the best example of what you're talking about probably is the formation of the United Kingdom. Recall that in 1707, you have the Act of Union, where Scotland officially enters the United Kingdom. Of course, the English and the Scottish have been at each other's throats, and you see that Scotland is voting to have another referendum next year to withdraw from the United Kingdom, which will probably prevail because they don't want to leave the European Union, which England is determined to do. And so with the Act of Union in 1707, in the trade union movement, I used to be the trade union lawyer, it led to what in trade union movement we would call pork chop unity. That is to say, you might have contradictions, but to keep those pork chops flowing, you got to bury those contradictions and antagonisms. And, of course, we were the pork chops. And so you see that the Scots played a very heavy role in the rise of the British Empire in the 1700s, not only as settlers, but also as administrators. But then with the demise or the erosion of the British Empire in the 20th century, and, of course, the low-hanging fruit all being accumulated, you then see the Scottish saying, you know what, we don't think we're profiting that handsomely from this United Kingdom, so we're pulling out. So there's something to be said about your thesis that this desire to profit off the misery of others has oftentimes led to European unity. In fact, I mean, you're echoing W.E.B. Du Bois in his influential essay, The African Roots of War, written circa 1915, where he talked about World War I, where he said that what was driving it was the fact that Germany was late to the colonial feast. It was now a power. It thought that England was in decline, so it decided that there needed to be reconfiguration. And so, in other words, feasting on Africa in particular was a motive force of war, just like you can say feasting on Africa helps to drive a kind of concord at certain moments between and amongst European powers.
Professor Horne, you after 1776, when the settlers here defeated the British, you mentioned that by 1790, the U.S. at that time had taken control of the slave trade in Cuba, and by 1840 had taken control of the slave trade in Brazil. How did that affect, what effect did that do on our ancestors in the diaspora? Because, and this is basically a question, we have a lot of Africans or blacks of African descent diaspora in Cuba, which is a small island, and in Brazil has more children of African descent than the whole United States. The U.S. taking control after the defeat of Britain of the slave trade in all these other places, how did that lead to so many of our ancestors in Brazil and Cuba, for example?
Well, it's not only the United States surging into control of the slave trade, but also Texas. Recall that in 1836, Stephen F. Austin, Sam Houston, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, and all these people who are somehow seen as heroes by some.
Okay.
They revolted against Mexico, not least since Mexico in the previous decade had moved towards abolition of slavery, and in fact had a president of African descent, Vicente Guerrero, 180 years before Barack Obama. So there was this, just like 1861, there was a secession to perpetuate slavery. 1836, Texas had moved to do the same thing. Shortly thereafter, you found the Texas flag off the coast of Africa, off the coast of Brazil, off the coast of Cuba. Galveston, Texas, which is now a kind of backwater south of Houston, was a major slave trading depot. By the way, Jack Johnson, the heroic heavyweight boxing champion, was from Galveston, Texas.
Yes.
As was Barry White, by the way, the late crooner. In any case, what happens is that Texas then came under pressure from both Haiti and Britain to mend its slave trading ways. And as a result, by 1845, Texas could not stand the pressure, so it entered the United States of America because it needed backup, as they say in the streets. And they got that backup from the United States of America. And then, of course, Texas seceded with the Confederate States of America in 1861 to try to continue slavery. And in fact, as late as 1860, you had hundreds of Africans from the Congo being smuggled into Galveston to be enslaved, to be slaves. So this obviously had a devastating impact upon the fortunes of Africa. I just wrote a sentence in my Settlers Apocalypse book where it's mostly about the 17th century, but of course I deal with the precursors. And one of the precursors, of course, is the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama, who sailed south from Portugal around Africa in the late 1490s. And he's on his way to India because, of course, the riches of Asia is a motive force for both Christopher Columbus and most of these European pirates known as explorers. And he's passing through the Indian Ocean, coming back to Portugal in the late 1490s, and he's angry about something, so he just sort of whimsically bombards Mogadishu in Somalia, just on general principles. I mean, this is the kind of outlaw nonsense, murderous, bloodthirsty piracy that characterized this so-called rise of the North Atlantic countries, which, of course, the rise was built upon a towering corpse, a towering mountain of African corpses, not to mention the destruction of Africa, which is something that Walter Rodney, the late Guyanese historian, talked about in his book, how Europe underdeveloped Africa, and, of course, how the late Trinidadian scholar and politician Eric Williams talked about in his book, Capitalism and Slavery. I'm afraid I'm going to have to end it there because I'm already late to my next appointment.
Listen, I want to thank you for being with us, Professor Horne. Brother Richard, I know you want to get him back so you can go down the path of one of our greats, Paul Robeson.
Yes, and also hopefully by that time your book will be out, your new book will be out, and we can be able to explore that also.
The Apocalypse of Settler Colonialism, in other words.
Yes.
Oh, I should also mention, since we're talking about new books, I have a book coming out also this year on the pro-Tokyo Negroes. Because as I said in my earlier remarks, the Africans in North America were always trying to find foreign allies. And so this book will be about Japan and Afro-Asian solidarity. Then I have a book coming out on the black press. And then I also have a book coming out on aviation, because the Negroes were captivated by the idea of flying, because it was both a way to escape this hellhole and also a way to bomb this hellhole.
Professor Horne, I want to thank you for being with us this evening, and I look forward to you coming back and more discussion.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
We'll be right back after a brief break. We'll be in open forum the rest of the way, so give us a call. There's a couple callers on hold. And, oh, boy, let me get this thing queued up. Richard, it was an interesting discussion that we had with Professor Horne. I wanted him to stay a little longer, but he told me that he had about an hour because I saw some stuff that was posted on Facebook that he was at a discussion earlier with, oh, boy, how do I always forget his name?
Sound like me now.
I know it. The professor from Princeton, Cornell West.
Cornell West.
Yes, him and Cornell West had an engagement, and I think he's either just coming from it or he has to attend it. So he told me that he had about an hour to share in reference to the book, but his work is a whole litany of work. Based on our ancestors. I'm going to read some of the titles for our listening audience: Confronting the Black Jacobins, the U.S. and the Haitian Revolution, the Origin of Dominican Republic, Race to Revolution, the United States and Cuba during Slavery and Jim Crow, the Counter-Revolution of 1776, Slave Resistance and the Origins of the United States of America, Black Revolutionaries, William Patterson and the Globalization of the African-American Struggle for Freedom, Negro Comrades of the Crown, African-Americans in the British Empire Fight the U.S. Before Emancipation, Fighting in Paradise, Labor Unions, Racism, and Communists in the Making of Modern Hawaii, W.E.B. Du Bois, a biography, and many, many other titles that he has in reference to our struggles here in this country and documents our struggles. That's why I always like to have these historians come on to talk about their work, talk about things that they have discovered in reference to our ancestors, because we know little about, we know some things that have been told and we retell those stories, but we know little about a lot of the details behind a lot of these things going on. And discussion tonight showed it about the founding of this country. It was basically to forestall emancipation of African labor, 1776. So, we'll come back at the brief break and go into open forum. You can join the conversation, too, by dialing 215-490-9832. That's 215-490-9832. We'll be in open forum the rest of the way. So give us a call. We got a couple calls on hold. Be part of the discussion. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Black Talk Radio Network. For podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com.
All Insurance Incorporated, an African-American owned and operated insurance agency in business for over 20 years, located at 231 Southeastern Road in Glenside, PA, with other offices in Germantown and West Philadelphia. Call now for commercial insurance quotes, homeowners insurance quotes, automobile insurance quotes, notary and tax services, representing over 15 major A-rated insurance companies, offering a discount on all notary services when you call in for a free quote. Call this number, 215-885-2444. That number is 215-885-2444. 215-885-2444. All Insurance Incorporated.
Before your roof becomes unruly, call Dooley. Dooley Brothers, specializing in shingle, rubber roofs, gutters, downspouts, and vinyl sidings. Call for your free estimate today. 215-224-3882. That's 215-224-3882. Dooley Brothers Roofing, the roofing experts you can trust. That number again, 215-224-3882. 215-224-3882. Before your roof becomes unruly, call Dooley.
Hey, did y'all see the stuff I posted on my wall?
No, it didn't even show up in my news feed.
Man, I'm done with social media. All the injustice and brutality going around, and it's like they're trying to suppress our voice. We're trying to get the message out there, and you can't even share empowerment and what's going on around the country either.
Nah, don't be dumb with social media, though. It's a tool, and there is a place where we have a voice. It's a Let's Buy Black 365 social network. You do anything you would on any other social network. Post pictures, videos, status updates, share resources and community news. But on Let's Buy Black 365, it's a platform for us and by us to tell our messages.
Whoa, that's like a digital underground railroad.
What's the name of that site again?
It's letsbuyblack365.com.
Yeah, I heard about that. It's all about networking, and you get points, right?
Yeah, the more you network, post, and share, the more points you get. Plus, you get points for posting pictures, sharing information, attending community events, and inviting others to network with you on the app.
Wow, that's all I need to know. I'm going to go download that app right now.
Now, better yet, let me invite you so I can get some points. It's all about empowerment and solutions, y'all.
Yeah, that's what's up. I'm all in.
Let's do it. Let's share our stories.
Let's buy
Black365.com.
That says there's a zero quota on blacks coming into the country, but it'll be a white country for white Europeans only. Now, in the Constitution, here's how the coding started working. The coding came up, they says, all the people. Every time the white society says all the people, we the people, the American people, they are not talking about you. You are the people to be excluded. That's why in the Constitution, there's no place in the Constitution, not in one instance, does it ever mention the word slave. Never does it include the word slavery. Whenever they want to start talking about black folk in the Constitution, starting out in the 1600s, 1700s, what they said is they use very broad and ambiguous terms to relate to black folk. Like those who are indebted, those who are abundant, those that species of property. to make sure that what they're deciding, and they use this when they met to form the Constitution in Philadelphia in 1779. When all the so-called founding fathers got together, what they said is this: let's not taint this document we're getting ready to create called the Constitution. Let's not taint it talking about slavery or about slaves. We're getting ready to screw over some people, but we don't want anybody to know about it. We want to leave no fingerprints. No fingerprints should be left on what we're getting ready to do. This is fact. For the first 3 days in the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, they kept the doors locked while they all debated whether or not slave and slavery should show up in the Constitution, and what terms they should use. And they went out of their way to say that nobody ought to use those terms. We would use very broad and ambiguous terms. So when Thomas Jefferson rewrote the Constitution, he had to write it 3 times to make sure that there was nothing left in there, no fingerprints left of what was going to happen to a certain group of people. And so when you read the Constitution, it says, we the people, you just had it. All the people, you just had it. When the Constitution said that all men are created equal, they weren't talking about you. Because at the same time the Constitution said all the people are equal. They had already classified in the Constitution that you would be a 3/5 of a human being. They weren't talking about you. But somehow, my people never understand that. They talk about the Constitution, what they call the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers knew the game. They set that up in the Constitution so that they can always track that with no fingerprints. When they said in the Constitution, for instance, that all people are created equal, they've been endowed by their God to have inalienable rights. To what? To life, liberty, and what? No, that's what it got you again. It wasn't for the pursuit of happiness. It was pursuit of property. They switched on you. Initially, it was supposed to be the pursuit of property. Nobody on this earth has got past the 3rd grade with think people, white folk, that foolish to come across the oceans in 3 months and sailing on a boat with barely enough food and water to live and come to the United States looking for happiness.
From antiquity to the present, our people need to develop a new paradigm. It's time for an awakening with your host, Brother Elliott. Sundays, 7 p.m., Fridays at 8 p.m. For podcasting or live program scheduling, hit us up at timeforanawakening@gmail.com. Welcome back to Time for an Awakening. I want to thank our guest, historian, author, and chair of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston, Professor Gerald Horne, shared with us for a little over an hour this evening the book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, Slave Resistance and the Origins of the United States of America was the topic. And it's a good discussion, Brother Richard. Looking forward to him coming back on to kind of go into some of his other works. It'd be an interesting discussion when he comes back. You know,
and I'm glad that he was able to put that the current geopolitics in perspective with that historical framework.
Yeah, I mean, it lets our people know that the mindset of Europeans haven't changed. You know, people look around, black folks, oh, things is different now. You know, they got to look. A lot of this stuff haven't changed. Sure, times have changed. We don't live in 1776 and people walking around with skirts and wigs on their head and things of that nature. The white folks don't dress like they did then. The mindsets haven't really changed. And that's what we need to do. We need to change our mindset. Too many of us walk around with European mindsets. We look at the world through European eyes. We have Eurocentric outlook on a lot of things. That needs to change. And the only way we change that is through education and re-education. We got a call that was on hold. In fact, a couple callers that was on hold. And there's some things I wanted to mention, too, in reference to our Friday's program. But let's grab a call or two. A caller, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Brother Timothy Shaffeley.
How are you, sir?
Can you hear me, Brother Elliott?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Brother Reggie, Brother Elliott, how are you? Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to talk to your guest because I've been in and out of this book called The Team of Rivals, which was based on Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask him a question about this gentleman by the name of Speed. they said that Lincoln was influenced by Steve to make the decisions he made on emancipation. According to the book, Lincoln started the emancipation in the first term of his presidency and also the second. I wanted to go in-depth with him. I'm pretty sure he knows about this person, Steve. So many things are said about Lincoln and his decisions in the Civil War. The other thing I wanted to ask you was this clown named Trump, the connection with the Russians, what is hacked, what is not hacked, and the propaganda that's going on with his administration. But I guess when I see him or talk to him, we'll get back on that.
Well, you know what?
You got some big guests coming. So until he comes, I'm pretty sure you can have some loaded guests and some loaded information until he gets here.
You know what? Richard might, because Richard is down here at the museum. He's a tour guide. I don't know whether he knows much about that person that you discussed. I've never heard of him.
Not offhand, not offhand, but Dr. Horne did speak on both of the points of that it was when Lincoln used it was a military strategy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, most definitely.
That part, okay, I'm with it. But it's something about this guy named Steve that I hear a lot of folks talk about. But he'll be back. And y'all keep up the good work, man. I know you're going to have other guests coming. So I guess I wait to hear what the other callers have to say.
You know, they and I mentioned it to Richard. Our guest from 2-3 weeks ago, Wesley Muhammad, was in town today. I intended to go down and see him, and I didn't make it. I know a lot of our calls. Brother Tim, were you able to go down and talk with Brother Wesley Muhammad?
Not only did I talk to him, brother, I bought his book. He signed it. He talked about your radio program. And I want to get another one of his books on his understanding of God and creation. I can tell from his books he's very much influenced by the Nation of Islam, which I can see that he has done in-depth study to bring about these books that he has. In this book, Understanding the Assault on Black Men, Black Manhood, and Black Molestation, he makes the transition of, like you talked about, the Europeans at one time wore wigs, and now they're modern day, the same folk with the same type of tactics, same type of strategy. What he does, he goes all the way back from shadow slavery and brings it up through the 50s. He goes through the depression of the 30s and brings up to modern day situation of this stuff that we call crack, which was a plague on our community, up to now. So he makes the transition like we should make it as answers in the city. This man and woman is the same people that started all this madness in America all until now. They're the same crackers, the same devils. And we got to learn how to make those transitions. He was really good, brother. He was really good.
Yeah, I knew that I was going to be a little tied up. I knew I wasn't going to be able to make it down there, but I knew that some of the listeners would be able to go down there and talk with him. I'll be in touch with him in communications probably next week sometime, and we'll get some things together because he said that he wanted to come back on to discuss a few more other things in the future. So the door is always open.
He's looking forward to coming on.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking forward to it. Yeah. All right, brother. I'll listen to the other callers.
Thank you for your call, sir.
Peace. Yeah.
You know, Richard, before I go to because we got two other calls on hold, I want to reflect back to our conversation on Friday with the legislative chair of NCOBRA, Brother Cam Howard, that talked about, because as the legislative chair, he's appointed to lobby black support, particularly the Black Caucus support for new House Bill H.R. 40. At this time, since it's been introduced in January of this year, it's 26 members of the Congress that have sponsored the bill. I think he mentioned, and you could correct me, Brother Richard, that they need 100 to send this to the floor of Congress and before the Senate. And he told a listening audience how they could go in there and see exactly, because he, he mentioned that he was going to give him 7 opportunities. To me, that's more than enough. I wouldn't give nobody 7 opportunities to answer my request. But he said he was going to give him 7 opportunities to answer or at least acknowledge his request as far as them signing on to sponsor the bill, which seems to be, I don't even know how to put that in words, man. I don't understand some of these people. I just don't understand them. But let me share this with you, because I did go to the site and look up before we go to our next caller, and look up Bill H.R. 40, and seen it's 52 members, and the listening audience can correct me if I'm wrong. 52 members of the Black Caucus, and 20 have signed on to the bill. Of the other 32 need to be called on the carpet by folks they represent, by writing letters, calling them on the phone, harassing them when you see them in public or whatever, to get explanations to why they're not supporting this bill. Basically, we talked about it tonight. It doesn't go to correct any historical wrongs. It's no amount of money or pleadings or saying I'm sorry that can go towards correcting this wrong, a crime against humanity. But the need for reparations is clear. And to understand the mentality of some of these black elected officials, why they don't support this bill, is they need to explain this to the people they represent. But let me read some of the names of the Black Caucus members that have signed on to the bill. If you don't hear your representative and he's a Black Caucus member, he or she, then you know that they're not a part of the bill. Joyce Beatty, a Democrat from Ohio, caucus member. She signed on as a sponsor. Stanford Bishop, a Democrat out of Georgia, has signed on as a sponsor. C.K. Butterfield, Democrat out of North Carolina, have signed on as a sponsor. William Lacey Clay Jr., a Democrat from Missouri, have signed on to Bill H.R. 40. Elijah Cummings, Maryland, have signed on as a sponsor. Danny Davis of Illinois have signed on as a sponsor. Keith Ellison from Minnesota have signed on as a sponsor. Al Green from Texas, not the R&B singer, have signed on as a sponsor. Alcee Hastings from Florida have signed on as a sponsor. Bernice Eddie Johnson from Texas have signed on as a sponsor. Barbara Lee from California have signed on as a sponsor. Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas have signed on as a sponsor. John Lewis, one of our callers' favorite persons, have signed on as a sponsor. Gwen Moore from Wisconsin have signed on as a sponsor. Eleanor Holmes Norton from Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, have signed on as a sponsor. Cedric Richmond, Democrat from Louisiana, has signed on as a sponsor. Bobby Rush from Illinois have signed on as a sponsor. Terry Sewell from Alabama have signed on as a sponsor. Benny Thompson from Mississippi has signed on as a sponsor. So if you didn't hear your congressperson or caucus person named, and congressperson, whether they're white or black, and especially the Black Caucus signed on, then you know that they are not sponsoring or have, as of now, signed on as a sponsor to this bill to get it before the legislative body. So you do have 20 members that have signed on. Now, it's kind of ironic that another bill came to the floor for sponsorship and will be coming to the floor. It's probably already been to the floor. I'm not up on politics like that, but I did do a little research on this. H.R. 78. Now, this bill was a bill reiterating the undisputable fact that Nazis targeted Jewish people during the Holocaust. I don't know what significance this bill is, but it's to reiterate that Nazis targeted Jews during the Holocaust. Well, I think Nazis targeted a lot of folks during the Holocaust. But this bill had 126 sponsors, so it's probably already been passed as a resolution or whatever they do. But it had 126 sponsors, and an overwhelming majority of CBC members signed on to this bill to reiterate the fact, the undisputable fact, this is the language of the bill, that Nazis targeted Jews during the Holocaust. They didn't have no problem signing on to that bill. They seem to have problems signing on to H.R. 40. 20 members done signed on. And some of the same members that had signed on to this bill signed this other bill.
Mm-hmm.
They supposed to be good politicians. They don't know how to play the game. Get some of these so-called Jews to sign this bill. That's what you're supposed to be doing in politics. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. They signed on to this bill, and they only got 20 members signing on, and it's 26 members. 6 white folks have signed on to this new H.R. 40 bill. Come on, man. These people, boy, I'm telling you. Let's go to a couple calls. They're on hold. 215 area code. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, how you doing, Brother Elliott? Hi, Brother Richard.
Hey, sir. How you doing?
All right. Yeah, I was glad that Brother Timothy was able to go down and see Brother West. I wasn't able to get down there because of scheduling things myself. But like Brother Timothy said, one of the first books he brought, and Timothy mentioned it, was a Concept of God. I got that book several years. Excellent book, And, I want to talk. By the way, Brother Elliott and Brother Richard, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Of course, you said you didn't hear your congressperson's name. Yeah, I didn't hear Bob Brady and Dwight Evans had signed on, Elliott. Surprise, surprise. I know I didn't hear Maxine Waters had signed on yet. I'm saying yet for her, so I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. But, yeah, I'm not surprised that Bob Brady and Dwight Evans.
Now, wait a minute, Joe. Now, you might fall out your chair. I want you to hold on to the arms.
Okay.
Bob Brady did sign on.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Because I didn't hear you mention his name. That's why.
No, I didn't mention his name because I was mentioning black caucus members.
Okay, I got you.
I said it was 6 white ones that signed on.
Wow, he did sign.
Yeah, he's one of the white ones.
But Dwight Evans did not sign.
Now, listen, he's playing politics when he does that. So what's stopping these black ones from playing the same game?
Exactly.
They signing on. I just read the roll call. They signed on to this H.R. 78 bill. Reiterating that Jews was targeted by Nazis during the Holocaust. They had no problem signing that bill, but they can't sign their own bill, H.R. 40, and get some of these other ones that they done sign their bills to sign it.
It's a head stretcher, Brother Elliott and Brother Richard. It's a head with these Negroes.
No, it ain't no shoot. They need a foot in there behind. More than that.
Of course, I'm trying to be diplomatic, but you're right, Brother Elliott. You're right. No disagreement there.
And the one that just went in there, he signed the bill. He signed this bill I'm talking about, H.R. 78, reiterating that the indisputable fact, and I'm just quoting the language, indisputable fact that Nazis targeted Jews during the Holocaust. Your guy, and I'm just being facetious when I say your guy, the guy that you confronted at that breakfast last week, he signed on that bill. He just got there. He signed on to that bill, Richard.
And just took office.
Now, he can sign this bill, this H.R. 78. He can't sign H.R. 40. What's the matter with his hands?
See, and this is why, and this is why I tell you and Richard all the time, Elliot. This is why brothers like Glenn Ford and Bruce Dixon keep a foot up that Black Caucus behind, because they need to. Because these guys, these people, man, I'm telling you, just oh boy. But I want to comment on Professor Horne, but I want to just step back for just a minute and talk about Brother Wesley Muhammad's visit. I'm sure, like Brother Timothy mentioned, he was talking about the emasculation and feminization of the black male image. And like I said, Brother Elliot and Brother Richard, see, when you look at these black athletes, these superstar black athletes like the Russell Westbrooks of the world, and the brother I mentioned on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and some of these other brothers and stuff that there was another brother too, one of the other prime athletes that just not long ago was dressed up like a woman. So when I forgot his name escapes me, it'll come back to me at some point. Well, anyway, when these brothers, and of course we know about the actors like the Martin Lawrences of the world, how they done dressed up like women and all that stuff in the movies, Big Mom and all that stuff. But you notice, Brother Ellen Reed, this is what the listener audience that listens to Tom really understand this. See, white people, they understand the image that they portray. Like I said, we all know that the white man is the number one homosexual, no question about that. But see, white boys, now you look at some of these white icons, like I said, these white athletes like the Tom Brady's, the Peyton Mannings, these white alpha male actors and stuff, the George Clooney's, the Ben Afflecks and all them. They may be, for all we know, they might be doing some they might have a little sugar in their tank. But see, these guys are smart enough, these basketball players, the Larry Birds of the world. See, these white boys know the image they project to white America, especially white youth. They want to project that masculine image. So they're not going to be up there. They're not going to let nobody put dresses on them and lipstick and women clothes and tight pants like the Russell Westbrooks of the world do. Because these white boys know the importance of presenting that alpha male image to white America. But all too often our black actors and black athletes, they all too willing to let themselves be put on dresses and wigs and just emasculating their manhood in front of the whole world. And this is wrong. But see, the sad part is that some of these brothers don't even see nothing wrong with it. They think it's a game. They think they don't see no contradiction. They think it's something cute and stuff. But there's nothing cute about that. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm glad that brothers like Wesley Muhammad has come, point this out, because this stuff needs to be drilled into the heads of these brothers throughout America. Hey, y'all brothers got to stop this foolishness. Y'all got to stop. You're a man. Men don't wear bras. Men don't wear panties. Women wear women's stuff and men wear apparel. You know, I mean, that's simple. I mean, this got to be made clear as this day is. You know what I mean, Elliot and Richard? This is simple as that, man. This foolishness has got to stop. But anyway, on Brother Professor Horne, yeah, I like how the brother's well versed on things, and he makes the connection between the diabolical stuff that these Europeans have done and still doing, and it goes back to Brother Elliot to what you just said. This European mindset, like you said, it's not changed. I mean, like you said, we always think to make that comment, these white folks will never change. It's their nature. That's what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was trying to teach us back then. These people, that's their mentality. These people are natural bloodshedders by nature. They murderers. They rapists. They conquerors, land conquerors. This is who they are. I mean, this is who these people are. Wherever you can have I close to these last couple points, Brother Richard and Brother Elliot. You can have a peaceful nation. I'm not even talking about Europeans. I give you a good example. You know, here in America, we got the Amish, right? Mm-hmm. And you know how the Amish live among themselves. They white folks, but peace don't bother nobody. I guarantee you, if you had a group of these white folks here in these United States from the South, the Midwest, these racist rednecks, let them be around them Amish long enough. I'm talking about when they be around them for like a whole year. You'll see the Amish people turn into murderers, rapists, robbers, and everything, because everywhere they go, they take a peaceful, loving people that was peaceful, whether it be Europeans or people of color. Once these devils get through it with them people never the same again. They turn the whole people into murderers. They leave their filth and garbage right there, and the people turn from being peaceful, loving people, God-fearing people, to murderers, liars, and rapists. Look what they did. Look at what they did to countries like Iraq and Libya, countries that was peaceful and stuff. When Iraq and Libya will never be the same again unless Almighty God, Allah, puts his hand on it, because they don't want to destroy these countries, and that's why they mad with Russia, because Putin, whatever you want to say about Putin and stuff, we know he's European, Caucasian, but the point is Putin wouldn't let the United States get over there and do the Syria, because had they got over there and did the Syria, what they was able to do to live in Iraq, Syria will never be the same again. I mean, because wherever this man goes at, he leaves nothing but a trail of death and destruction. Wherever he leaves he leaves homosexuality, he leaves criminality behind, filth, bad food, bad water, you know, anything that's bad and detrimental, this European leaves it behind. Whether he's the white man from Europe or the white man from America, wherever he goes around the world, he leaves nothing but a trail of death and destruction. And this is why it's so important, like you said, for us to change our thinking around, because these people are not going to change. Donald Trump is just mirroring the mentality of these bigots and stuff. And the last point, see, white people, like you say, they somehow got this fantasy white working class people, they latched on to Donald Trump's bandwagon. They think that Donald Trump is going to somehow miraculously wave us wine or whatever and get them riches and stuff. Ain't happening to white folks. Donald Trump is part of the ruling elite. He don't give a damn about these poor, but he will use them to further his aim. Donald Trump don't give a rat's ass about poor working class white people, but they have hitched to his bandwagon, but they in for a rude awakening. Donald Trump and his minions, they're going to destroy white America as we know it. You mark my words. Black folks going to get hurt in the process? Sure, especially if we don't knuckle up and support our, like say, buy 365 black. We don't do the things we're supposed to do. We're gonna catch hell, but we do what we're supposed to do. In spite of Donald Trump and his minions, we can still make it. But these white folks that supported him out of racism and thinking he's gonna do all, they going for a rude awakening. Donald Trump gonna kick them right up their ass, which they deserve to be kicked up their ass for their bigotry, hatred, and racism. So, condoning police brutality, all the mistreatment against our people over Emmett Till murders and Trayvon Martin. All this of these devils have condoned over the years. Donald Trump is gonna give it right back to them, right in their face. He's gonna give it back to them, not one-fold, two-fold, but threefold. Mark my words.
Thank you for your call, man.
Thank you, Brother Elliott.
Let's go to 704. 704? 704.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Brother Elliott and Brother Richard, this is Scotty. I love it when you have these historians on. I was just reading some history today. I'm actually going to do a broadcast on Donald Trump praising Andrew Jackson, who was a Scot Irish. But listen though, that reveals a lot about how he thinks and how he's operating. As I was just preparing for this and taking notes and stuff, I'm seeing a lot of similarities between how he set up his administration and how Jackson set up his administration. But the reason I called in was, can you please repeat that information again about that bill about Germany targeted Jews during World War II? I mean, no joke. I mean, why do we need to be reminded of that? But can you please repeat that?
Oh, the bill number?
Yes, in a little bit of text of it that you shared.
Well, you know what? What I had stated was the bill was H.R. 78. Okay. And the language is reiterating the indisputable fact that Nazis targeted Jewish people during the Holocaust. Now, I don't know.
But
like
they killed 11 million people. Before they targeted Jews, they targeted people who classify themselves as communists.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I said. It was other people targeted, including blacks.
Yeah, and that's racist. That show you the racism right there, where you want to try to act like you the sole victim of Nazi Germany. You wasn't even the first victim, but you sat on the sidelines when they was targeting everybody else. That's why Pastor Neil Moeller came out with that little poem that he wrote. First they came for the gypsies. I wasn't a gypsy, so I ain't stand up. Then they came for the trade unionists, and so on until he got to the Jews. Them Jews wasn't standing up for them other people. You know what I'm saying? That they was targeting. And so all I see this is just more propaganda. It shows the Zionist control over Congress. Do you know?
Oh, most definitely. I agree.
Do you know how many of them people have dual citizenship in Israel? Obama's administration was full of them. You know what I'm saying? And so, that go to show also, that black people, in terms of us putting together this voting bloc and developing economic power to back up the political power, because it takes money to have political power, okay? You can talk and you can vote all you want to, but you ain't getting no bills moved unless you can play the game like them Jews play the game, or any other special interest group in this country. And right now they are attacking the boycott, divestment, sanction global program that is pointing out that Israel is a racist apartheid nation. And it's a reason that them people over there that's European Jews are called Ashkenazis. And I'll leave you with that. Thank
you. Brother Scotty, thanks for your call, man. Let's go to 646. 646, I'm sorry, area code. 646. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Elliot, how are you today, my good brother?
Hey, brother. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, listen, Elliot. Let me ask you a question, and maybe you could answer it, or good brother Ralph could.
Richard.
Richard? Excuse me.
Mm.
What do these American Negroes want from this white man? What is their purpose here in America in regard to their dealings with this white man based on our history and what this filthy Neanderthal is doing each and every day to African people here and abroad? What do we want from them?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about some of the people that we're talking about, what do they want? Listen, I think that they want to be accepted. They want, for lack of a better term, pat on the head. They want to be accepted. I mean, do you agree, Richard? What do you think?
It's interesting because I wanted to ask Professor Horne, because my context is that one thing that occurred, what he laid out, you had the resistance community, as he laid out, that was operating from the 1700s, before the 1700s through the 1750s. And as he showed those, and if you look at the three books that he did, that counter-revolution of 1776, the Negro Comrades of the Crown, and the Race to Revolution, there was that other group of population who fought with, whether it be with the British or the colonists, or as he said, the settler colonists.
Yeah, but
yes, they wanted.
Yeah, but those people, they wanted freedom.
They wanted freedom.
What I think Jay is talking about is the people now.
No, freedom. When you say freedom, also, what is freedom? What is freedom to the black man here in America? Is it to have you a house, a car, the ability to have you a Neanderthal on your side, to be, like you said, patted on the head by the white man, to have all of the things that he has? It's like, why should a white man want to give you and share with you all of his luxuries in life without making you demean yourself, disrespect yourself, emasculate yourself, to even get a small part of it? It's like a dog is not going to share his dog food with a cat unless he's been trained to share his dog food. And then at some point in time, he's going to get tired of sharing his dog food with the cat. I mean, no other species other than this American Negro has this incessant need to get along with their damn oppressor, with their moral enemy. It's absolutely, if you think about it, it's effing sickening. I mean, think about it. There's no other species on this planet to whereas you could do all of the things that the white man has done to us, and they would have the need to be like them, to want all of the things that they want, to not feel whole unless they have those things, to educate their children to be like them. I mean, to just do whatever they could do to be an artificial Neanderthal. I mean, and it seems to me that we don't understand it. We don't even see this white man as an enemy. Now, here it is. I feel like starting a little trouble. So I know my beautiful queen sister Sarah is listening, and she always gets on my nerves and gets on me about the white daddy, Donald Trump. But I'm going to bring up Donald Trump for you tonight, Sarah. Listen, what has Donald Donald Trump, in all honesty, done for anybody white that is not on his same stratosphere? I mean, think about the things that he's doing. Everything that he's doing is hurting people that are below him, but doing everything that he can that can help people who are his equal or above. You know what I'm saying? But like sick Negroes, most white people are still backing and supporting and hoping that this Neanderthal is going to do right by him, a.k.a. jobs, which he's never going to do, a.k.a. health care, which he's not going to fix other than making his equals much more richer. You see what I'm saying? But it's like, when at some point in time do you as a people realize that you cannot progress in humanity, in life, trying to be like this cracker, trying to be a part of his system, and not trying to create your own system and culture? You just can't do it, man. You can't do it, because when it's all said and done, what happened? You just die a broken human being who spends your whole life trying to be like your oppressor, and in the process, years just tick off your life. And now it's so bad, Elliot, and think about this. Do you know that the average black family now cannot leave their children anything by the time they get ready to die, my generation?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I was coming up, to show you how wicked and how far ahead this cracker thing, when I was coming up, Elliot, you had a chance to do what I did, get a city job, right, to progress along from what my parents were, to be, in essence, better than your parents were, to the point to where you had a decent, somewhat income, you could have a home, you could have certain things. Do you know now that it is damn near impossible for children today to have the same type luxuries that I had and the same type opportunities, even those Negro peens? Because by the time they get to a certain status and level, they're going to be in so much debt, and the income and wages are not increasing to the point, and the cost of living is so high that they're basically with PhDs, masters, and all of these things. By the time you get finished, you still damn near going to be living paycheck to paycheck, as quiet as kept.
Jay?
Nobody wants to address this. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to set forward a vision at all to, number one, explain to your kids, don't get into debt for an education, learn a trade so you could be self-sufficient, and you can set up yourself in a position to whereas you could work for yourself, live modestly, invest your money, do the necessary things to where you're not indebted to this no-good, filthy devil. Nobody's teaching their kids that. You know what they're teaching their kids? Go to school, spend all of your money if you have the ability and you're accepted by the cracker to get in mass debt and hope that he will give you a job in a position. But you know something? The reality is he ain't going to give you nothing. And you know I feel most bad for, honestly, as time go on? Black women, especially if they're not real good looking. I don't care how intelligent, I don't care how gifted they are, I don't care how smart they are. If they're really not good looking and they don't have all the other attributes, they in a world of trouble because
Jay.
everybody else is coming to this country doing their thing. Hotep, brother.
Jay,
and hey, listen.
thank you for your
I enjoy your show.
Thank you for your contribution. And Jay, remember this is somebody for everybody, Jay.
That's right.
Thank you for
this perfect example of it.
Thank you for your call, man. Let's go to 731. 731 area code. What's your name? Where you calling from? 731.
Hey, what's up, Brother Ellis? This is Brother Danny, man.
How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How you guys doing?
Good.
All right. I want to talk about some current events.
Wait a minute. Say that again, Danny.
I want to talk about some current events.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have seen or had it mentioned about the police officer, the sheriff killing this guy in Crockett County, Tennessee. He was Facebooking it live. And
this is recent?
He was yes, this happened 2 days ago, man.
Oh, no. I didn't catch that then.
Yeah, you should find it on YouTube. I think the guy's last name was S. And he actually live streamed it as it was going on.
Okay.
And I wanted you guys to be aware of that. This brother was out of Louisiana, from my understanding. And based upon all the reports and the things that have come out, obviously this guy had some mental issues going on. And they shot this guy. They claimed he was trying to run over him with his car. I don't know, man. This happened probably about a little bit over a mile from my house.
Okay.
And it's kind of disturbing when it hits that close to home like that.
Okay.
And we've had, I don't know, man, probably over the last 3 years. You know, it may not be a lot to you guys when I say this, but, you know, in my area of West Tennessee, have 10 cop killings, you know, over a couple of years is kind of a big number for us. And we've seen numerous people being killed by police here in West Tennessee. And I just want you brothers to know, man, that this thing is real. That the extermination of black men is in full effect. What we saw in terms of the election of Donald Trump was not happenstance. There's a reason behind what you saw. There's a reason behind what we're seeing being put in place. And when you find out that police kill people, unarmed people, because they supposedly were a threat, and you see that they're prosecuted through that very Facebook that they stream from.
Okay.
Nobody seems to be exonerated when they stream their own deaths. Have you noticed that? It's always the police officer get off, man. So I wanted you guys to know that this thing is really happening. It has not stopped. And for it to happen as frequently as I have seen it happen here in my part of the country, and to know that something like that happened a mile away from my house, it gets to a point where the dialogue has to become a little bit more precise and a little bit more purpose-driven, because we cannot afford as black men to be taken away from our loved ones and slaughtered like our lives do not matter at all. Now, what you hear is, well, black people kill each other. But we all know why certain things happen. Whites kill whites, black kills black, so on and so forth. Geography and demographics are normally the main culprits. But I want you guys, if you get a chance, Brother Elliot and Brother Richard, look at the video. It's on YouTube. And have some dialogue about this, man. Because this brother died asking for a superior officer. So, I don't know. I'm a little shaken because, like I said, it was so close.
Okay.
And it hasn't made, national news that I know, but it is on Facebook. It's sprinkled all over Facebook. Daily Cause and several other entities have the story on Facebook. So if you guys get a chance, man, to check it out, please do. And as I said to your listeners, y'all, this thing is real. This country don't care about us. Period. Let's just get it out the way. You can't fake it. It don't care about us. So we've got to figure out another way. And I love to listen to that opening you have about shifting the paradigm. We have to. Because if we don't, man, everybody talk about other endangered species. We're the endangered species, bro. We're the endangered species. So we got to do something, man. We got to do something better. But thanks, man, for taking my call. And I love your show. I listen all the time. I may not call, but I definitely got my ear to what you guys are saying, man.
Hey, thanks for your participation, brother. We'll talk soon.
All right, man. You have a nice day.
All right.
You too now. Peace.
Let's go to 773. I think I know who this is. 773.
You got me, brother?
That's right.
Brother, I'm calling from the most racist city on Earth, probably in the whole galaxy. I felt the brother that
Brother
just
X,
got
you
off.
heard the brother that just got off. I know
Yes, sir.
you following this
Yes,
call.
sir. Yes, sir. I heard him, and I hear many more people talking like him. And he needs to listen to me very carefully. But first, let me say this. Much love to all the slaves and other decent human beings. Now, Brother Elliot and Brother Richard, did I ever tell y'all about my 9-year-old granddaughter?
I'm not sure. You might have. What?
Yeah.
What? Go ahead.
Well, I do tell. Sometimes she stares and asks to turn this question. Like some time ago, she asks me, she said, Grandpa. I said, yes, darling. She asks me, Grandpa, what's the very first thing a people must have before reparations can even become a thought?
Wait a minute. Your granddaughter asked you that?
Yeah. I said, honey, I don't know. But let me ask Brother Richard and Brother Elliot, the two of the smartest brothers I know.
I knew something was behind it.
Now, I'm asking you all, what is the very first thing a people must have before reparations can even be considered?
They own mine.
They own man?
Well,
Yes,
I mean, I don't know what you want me to say, but
Okay, it's just a question. I just wanted to break this to you.
because if they don't have it, go ahead.
But the slaughter must stop. The slaughter must stop. Everybody who got reparations, the assault, stop.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, right. Okay, they stopped the assault on the Indians. They could have killed every single Indian. The assault stopped. Once they killed the masses of them, they took the land. They said, okay, that's enough. Okay. The Jews got out of Germany. The assault stopped. with us, Brother Richard and Elliot, the assault has not stopped. It is increasing with extermination, their agenda. So while we talk about reparations, I don't even consider no reparations because I know that we have no safety. They have not stopped assaulting us. They have not stopped killing us like the brother who just got out talked about. So talking about reparations when they still got plans to exterminate you, that's a pipe dream. That is a pipe dream. Now, the brother just got off. Young brother, listen very carefully. I don't know if you heard me or not. They are going to exterminate us. These people are psychopaths. They have been exterminating people for over 3,000 years. We are not going to be the first people they exterminated. We are not going to be the last one. Now, what you're seeing down there where you was, what I'm seeing in Chicago, police shot a young brother 16 times. He's been walking the streets 3 years on camera. They are dehumanizing us. They are preparing the world for what's going to happen here. Brother, young brother, we cannot stop this extermination. I'm not going to play with you. I'm going to let somebody else play with you. I'm going to tell you straight up. We can't stop this extermination. It's been going and playing too long. Marcus Garvey told us in the 1920s, if we don't get out of here and go back and reclaim Africa for us and the Africans, Garvey said they was going to do away with us here, and then they was going to do away with the Africans. It is going just like Garvey said. This is not our land. It will never be our land. These psychopaths are in total control. Stop playing with yourself. They're in total control. That's why this psychopath, Donald Hitler, is in office. The man is showing you, God damn, I'll put in Mighty Mouse. I'll put in Hopalong Cassidy if I want to.
You know, let me say this, Brother X, because listen, I hear a lot of the things you say, and a lot of the things I agree with. But this man think he's in total control. He's losing his grip all the time. He knows it.
Where he losing it at, Brother Elliot?
He knows it. He's losing his grip in the world. He's losing his grip in the world.
How? He got all these other countries following white supremacy. Chinese following white supremacy. Iraq following white supremacy. Everybody's going with white supremacy.
His grip is barely holding on in this world. I'm telling you. Okay. He knows it.
Yeah. Okay.
But the thing is, we didn't put ourselves here. He didn't put himself here. There is a higher power. And if any of our people believe in anything righteous, this is not going to continue.
Brother Eddie, what is the higher power? What is the higher power?
Well, I ain't going to go into all that. If you don't believe in higher power, that's up to you. But there is a higher power in control.
Okay, well, the higher power have not.
And he's not the high. Listen, understand this. He's not the higher power. He thinks he is. Now, if you buy into that, then you buy into it. He thinks he's the higher power.
How many people got to die?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. I can't answer that question. I don't know. But I do know this, that we got something that we need to do as a people. And if we start doing what we need to do, we can change this whole thing around.
I can't see you doing it here, Brother Elliot. I don't want to be.
Well, we don't necessarily have to do it here. Our people are all over this world.
Yes, sir. Okay.
But it has to start. It has to start with a mindset change.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It starts in the mind first.
I agree with
that. This place that he set up, you heard the historians talk about it. The historian, Gerald Horne, talk about it. This place he set up started in his mind first. And then he went on to do diabolical deeds to help him set it up. Now, this place was built on a house of cards.
Brother Eddie,
it was based on murder, genocide, everything evil. This place was built on that. It can't stand. It can't. The laws of nature says that it can't. Sure, it's here now. It's here now. But it can't stand. The thing is, we got to put ourselves in a position where we can keep standing. Because if you're holding on to this foolishness, you're going to go down with it. You got to understand that, and I know you understand it, Brother X. Richard ain't saying nothing. He understands it. This place was built on everything evil. Everything evil. It can't stand. Sure, it's here. I can't answer for any higher power to why he let it stand this long, why he let it even come in existence. I don't know. But I do know one thing, that it ain't going to stand. It ain't going to stand. It can't stand. We got to do what we need to do as a people. I want to thank you for your call, brother. Brother Richard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I heard you're silent. Just want to make sure you're still here.
There's nothing I can say to that, but the metaphor came to my mind. A blade of grass do go through concrete. So
yeah,
I hear it, but you know, that belief we have is, you know, as you say, in that whether it be a higher power or whatever anybody consider it, we are demonstrating it. It is not we have to, and that's I think that the continuation of being able to bring people like Professor Horne or even bring the effort, you know, about reparations on, or the whole thing of genealogy or being a sovereign. These are beliefs, ideals, people, convictions that don't necessarily say all this other stuff will stop, but it's saying eventually it will stop.
Yeah,
and I do agree with him.
Because listen, you could see from the discussion we had with Professor Horne, and then we've had a litany of historians on here. This man had evil ideas, and he made them come to fruition because he worked at it, and it existed. We see it. We got ideas based on our cultural experience and our experience here dealing with him. All we got to do is start putting forth the things that we know are right, and it'll change our dynamic.
That's true.
Let's grab a couple more before we get off here. We didn't went over time, but you know we could do that. Let's go to 803 area code. What's your name? Where you calling from? 803. All right, let's put the 803 back on hold. Let's go to 602 area code.
Yes, Brother Elliot and Brother Richard. This is Brother Marcus
Brother
from
Marcus.
Memphis.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, man. And it's good what you say a while ago, because the name of the game is He Who Lived the Longest Win. You see? And, you know, our people ain't been around here being stupid now. You know what I'm saying? You know, we went through slavery. Our people took law so that we can do what we're doing now. And as they said, the pen is mightier than the sword, but the tongue is mightier than both of them put together. So we just have to keep on keeping on. Now, as the historian was saying, you know, we are at a point where this is like a Reconstruction Part 2, because if you study Reconstruction after the Emancipation Proclamation, that's when they started, and blacks started moving up in politics. They started unleashing the Ku Klux Klan and the black codes and everything, and they turned back the clock. And that's what's happening here with Obama. After Obama, we see again the white folks trying to turn back the clock. But I think it's too late, you know, because you see the social fabric of the country, it's starting to split apart. The country starting to split, you know, the people, the social cohesion, you know, it's slowly coming apart, it's unraveling. And as Mr. Garvey said, he said, I think these white folks, they're going to rumble, because when Trump can't deliver, then we're going to really see the problem. Then these crackers going to really pick up their guns. And then what Garvey said, he said, when the elephants fight, the grass get trampled. And we the grass. So we just got to put ourselves in the right position and withdraw ourselves from them, because I think these people going to rumble. Because this thing is, like you say, it's a house of cards. It's collapsing on itself.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I want to say about this character, what's his name, Ben Carson. No, Ben Carson got the job as HUD president or whatever it is, the Minister of HUD or whatever. And then Trump go behind and cut the budget by $3 billion. So if I was this guy, Ben Carson, I would quit, because he ain't got no budget. See what I'm saying? He gave him the job, and then he cut the budget by $3 billion. So, you know, this guy has no teeth. But I think we are moving in the right direction, and we just got to keep on keeping on, you know, because, as I said, we're going to win this struggle. You take care, good brothers.
Marcus, thank you for your call.
All right, brother.
Richard, let's take our final break, and we'll be right back. Got about 10 more minutes. Maybe we'll go about 10 more minutes. And if you want to get your call in, you can do that by dialing 215-490-9832. That's 215-490-9832. Time for Awakening. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Black Talk Radio Network. For podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com.
All Insurance Incorporated, an African-American owned and operated insurance agency and business for over 20 years, located at 231 Southeastern Road in Glenside, PA, with other offices in Germantown and West Philadelphia. Call now for commercial insurance quotes, homeowners insurance quotes, automobile insurance quotes, notary and tax services, representing over 15 major A-rated insurance companies, offering a discount on all notary services when you call in for a free quote. Call this number, 215-885-2444. That number is 215-885-2444. 215-885-2444. All Insurance Incorporated.
Before your roof becomes unruly, call Dooley. Dooley Brothers, specializing in shingle, rubber roofs, gutters, downspouts, and vinyl sidings. Call for your free estimate today. 215-224-3882. That's 215-224-3882. Dooley Brothers Roofing, the roofing experts you can trust. That number again, 215-224-3882. 215-224-3882. Before your roof becomes unruly, call Dooley.
Hey, did y'all see the stuff I posted on my wall?
No, it didn't even show up in my news feed.
Man, I'm done with social media. All the injustice and brutality going around, and it's like they're trying to suppress our voice. We're trying to get the message out there, and you can't even share empowerment and what's going on around the country either.
Nah, don't be dumb with social media, though. It's a tool, and there is a place where we have a voice. It's a Let's Buy Black 365 social network. You do anything you would on any other social network. Post pictures, videos, status updates, share resources and community news. But on Let's Buy Black 365, it's a platform for us and by us to tell our messages.
Whoa, that's like a digital underground railroad.
What's the name of that site again?
It's letsbuyblack365.com.
Yeah, I heard about that. It's all about networking, and you get points, right?
Yeah, the more you network, post, post and share, the more points you get. Plus, you get points for posting pictures, sharing information, attending community events, and inviting others to network with you on the app.
Wow, that's all I need to know. I'm going to go download that app right now.
Now, better yet, let me invite you so I can get some points. It's all about empowerment and solutions, y'all.
Yeah, that's what's up. I'm all in.
Let's do it. Let's share our story.
Let's buy
Black365.com.
What is in 1 million brothers and sisters who are tired of the same old rhetoric, the same old leaders, the same old ways of dealing with political and economic empowerment? If you realize that nobody's going to save black people but us, if you understand that no existing political party prioritizes the best interests of African Americans as a collective, if you believe that leadership is as leadership does, and this means that the best leaders for the black collective must come from the ranks of those who place and hold the best interests of black people foremost and uttermost, if you understand that black people must develop the mindset and the will to finance their own racial uplift organizational efforts, then get involved with 1 million conscious black voters and contributors. The movement is now. Go to www.IamOneOfTheMillion.com. That's www.IamOneOfTheMillion.com.
At the end of last month, Donald Trump unveiled his military budget, obscenely inflated by $54 billion, a 10% increase that will be paid for with cuts to social programs. There was no organized denunciation from the Democrats, and a few days later, when former Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear gave the Democratic Party response to Trump's speech before the Congress, he had not a word of criticism for Trump's military budget, but instead charged that the president was ignoring serious threats to our national security from Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia. It is the great diversion by which the Democrats pretend to lead a resistance to Trumpism, but present no serious opposition to Trump and his fellow Republicans' gutting of poor and working people's programs in the service of militarism. The Democrats are putting up no real fight against Trump's domestic austerity agenda. Like Barack Obama, they would welcome a grand bargain with the Republicans that freezes or shrinks the social side of the budget while continuing to fund multiple wars all over the planet. Indeed, their principal problem with Trump was that he wasn't bellicose enough. They feared that he might not be eager to play nuclear chicken with the Russians. They are implacable in their battle with Trump, the man, but put up only the most pro forma resistance to Trump's people-crushing budget proposals. Do not expect the Democrats to wage an honest fight for the people's health care interests either. The Republican plan to replace Obamacare is, as expected, an unmitigated disaster. While Obamacare was festering in its own contradictions, the Republican replacement will likely result in 10 million more uninsured Americans and total chaos at every level of healthcare infrastructure, resulting in an almost instantaneous social and medical crisis, and not just for poor people. The Democrats cynically see the impending disaster as an opportunity to position themselves for the 2018 and 2020 elections. Although Obamacare is dead and cannot be resurrected, they will make a show of defending its various parts, one doomed element at a time, even as the private insurance markets that are available to lower-income people disintegrate. The Democrats will be glad to let the crisis fester under Republican corruption and incompetence, and then, as the next election season opens, propose some reworked version of Obamacare, probably with weak provisions for a public option. What they will not do as a party is respond to the crisis with a push for single-payer Medicare for all, a solution the party's corporate masters will not tolerate. Bernie Sanders himself has said that he has no plans to submit his own Medicare for all bill to the Senate this year, part of his accommodation with the Obama-Clinton party bosses. But that's fine. The demand should come from masses of people in the streets, representing the supermajorities that have favored single-payer for decades. This is a movement moment, and progressive activists must seize the time. The Democrats, however, anticipated that the left might take the initiative at this critical point in history, which is why they created the Great Russian Diversion, to distract silly minds. For Black Agenda Radio, I'm Glenn Ford. On the web, go to blackagendareport.com.
Welcome back to Time for an Awakening. And Brother Richard?
Yes. It's been another interesting and important dialogue. I believe the name of that young man that was shot is his last name is Hess, Rodney Hess.
Oh, you saw the information?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I got to. I usually, make sure I put stuff on the page there. That got by me, boy. I'll make sure I do my homework in reference to that and put up some information. It was in Jackson, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. He's from New Orleans and going to see his mother from the incident. The family put the video up for it to be seen.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll check it out and post some information in reference to it. Interesting dialogue tonight after Professor Horne left with the listening audience.
Yes.
It's a lot of information out there. We don't have to feel as though that, and I know that our listening audience don't, but I'm just saying this in general. We don't have to feel as though that there's no hope or there's nothing being done. There's a lot being done. We just don't have the proper lines of communications to have this information disseminate to the people that need to hear it. We utilize our program to do such, and we're going to continue to utilize this program to disseminate information. But some of these more powerful entities, especially on the terrestrial level, that have a lot of wattage, that can get huge messages out to our people, they decide to use their airwaves for a lot of foolishness a lot of times, laughing, joking, satires, and Amos and Andy skits. That's what we don't have time for. We don't have time for that. And there's nothing wrong with a laugh and joke occasionally, maybe on the weekend or something. But you don't need that type of stupid dialogue 6 days out of the week. On some of these stations, that type of dialogue is going on, Richard, 6 days out of the week.
There you go.
Bunch of foolishness, Amos and Andy, and come on here. Amos and Andy, rest in peace. The actors that played Amos and Andy is going on to their rest. And let that type of dialogue rest with them. We don't need that. We need serious dialogue and solutions being discussed so our people can move forward. And plus a lot of excuse me, go ahead.
And to help to connect the dots.
Oh, most definitely.
To show,
Totally agree. Because a lot of these things, they're not happening in a vacuum. It's all related. I'm glad that when Professor Horne was relating the stuff that was going on in the 1700s to stuff going on now, it's the same thing. The characters might have changed, but it's the same mindset. So, we know what we have to do. You know what? I was remiss in sharing this with the listening audience, but I better do it now before we leave the air. On Saturday, March 25th, 2017, the African American Freedom and Reconstruction League will have an open forum discussion on Women's History Month. We're asking members and attendees to discuss the fact-based history on some of our people's strong and courageous women, some prominently known and others not so prominently known, but served our neighborhoods and communities. It may have been that the woman who every child knew that it could seek out refuge in her house or seek protection from neighborhood bullies. She was one who didn't have much, but baked cakes to share with you and gave you something to eat when you lost your keys or had to wait until your parents got home. In return, she helped her carry her groceries, and we watched her steps. We're going to need more women like them under the present oppressors and his minions. If there's a favorite historical woman that you admire, like Ida B. Wells, Callie House, Septima Clark, tell us what it is about her that made you admire her. Come out and share your stories in honor of our women. The date is, again, is March 25th, 2017. The time is 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Joseph P. Coleman Library at 68th West Shelton Avenue between Germantown and Green Street in Philadelphia. Again, that's Saturday, March 25th, 1 to 4 p.m. The Joseph Coleman Library at 68 West Shelton Avenue. That's Germantown and Green, basically, in Philadelphia, PA. The admission is free to the public. For more information, you can contact 215-474-3577. That's 215-474-3577. Happy to hear that the Freedom and Reconstruction League is back up and moving again. I knew that Brother Rob was down for the count a little bit. He was in the hospital, but I'm glad that he's moving around. And I've been neglectful in calling him, and I'm sorry if he hears this or some of the Freedom and Reconstruction League members hear it. But I got to get in touch with Brother Rob. I've been falling down on my duties. He's always a good man, ready to support us, ready to support the black farmers when we bring them in. And we're going to need his support moving forward. So everybody that's within the sound of my voice that's in the Philadelphia area, go out to the next meeting, which is March 25th, 1 to 4 p.m. at the Joseph Coleman Library, 68 West Shelton Avenue. That's Shelton and Green in Philadelphia. I want to thank everybody for listening to the program this evening. Lively discussion, as always. And we'll be back on Friday, Lord willing. You know what? Friday, we might have to go solo. I think, Brother Richard, you're attending a conference or something on Friday, aren't you?
It's a conference in New Brunswick dealing with Timbuktu. I'm a Timbuktu believer, and they're dealing with the history of Timbuktu. And one of the brothers that did a couple of books on the manuscripts, and the reason why, besides, Brother Ed and Brother Battles, Brother Calvin from Philadelphia with PAF, or the Pan-African Federation, really kind of drilled that whole West Africa, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai into us. But Timbuktu being that another one of those knowledge centers, and they were able to get some of those families that have been holding on to those manuscripts for 500 years to bring some of them out. And to me, it just, once again, it was a way to be able to reinforce that during the medieval period, Africans, not necessarily dealing with information coming from other places, were able to deal with the whole thing of knowledge production using the Islamic, language system, but still being able to, in the sciences, medical science, astronomy, dealing with architecture, dealing with philosophy, where this is what was being stored in basements of these African families, whose responsibility was to maintain these manuscripts. And I really am excited about that. So they're having a conference in New Brunswick, and I want to attend there for that. And that's where I'll be, and I'm hopefully letting everyone know if anybody is free. And the university is hosting this conference, and then also the next day, that Saturday, is going to a city called Timbuktu in New Jersey, and I forget the actual name of the city, which is close by, where African settlement in New Jersey called Timbuktu.
Sound like a future guest might come out of that engagement.
Well, that's what I'll be looking for.
All right. I want to thank everybody for listening to the program this evening. Lively discussion, as always, and we'll be back next week, Lord willing, to continue on this path towards an awakening.